Yes, it's working. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, so you will have 10 minutes. And if you're able to keep an eye just on your chat box on your computer, I'll chat you some time cues, but you're good to go.
Sorry. Thank you so much. So sorry about that. Thank you so much for kind of just speaking with me and everything.
Of course.
This episode was so much fun. I loved how just it was delightful, even though it was like terrible what was happening at the same time. But I'm just like really enjoying it. I'm just wondering how they're going to mix in science and magic and what's going on. So I wanted to know from you, what was it about Salem, Massachusetts, the whole witch scenario that really pulled you in? That was like, this is the episode that I really want to explore.
First of all, thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. That was totally the exact intent. So I'm thrilled to hear that that's how it landed. What has always moved me about the Salem witch trials is that to me, it was sort of a time in which fear led to a lot of death. And that is something that repeatedly has happened throughout history. And I think the witch trials specifically, because they happened so long ago, have always stuck out as a metaphor for that for me. Even as a little girl reading The Crucible, there was something about it that said to me, hey, this is an example of something that didn't start and didn't stop with Salem. And so I knew I wanted to tell a story about that. And I think at the end of the day, I think why anybody is attracted to the idea of talking about witches or talking about witch trials is because what witch, being a witch represents metaphorically is this idea of having agency over your life, right? It's this idea that you can effect change in your universe. You can make something happen. And that is scary for people, right? The idea that somebody could have that much power. And I think as human beings, maybe we do have that much power. And so I've always been fascinated with that metaphor in general.
Right. And it's always fascinating that it's the women that's accused of being a witch. I've never really heard of the man is a witch.
Well, what's funny is, not funny, what's tragic, but ignored is, it's actually, people assume all the witches, accused witches in the Salem witch trials were women, but that's not true. Men and children also died during that time. But it's always, but there's definitely this feminine element about the witch trials that you just can't ignore, because it's, it's during that time period, that was who really didn't have a say over things like property or marriage, fill in the blank. And so that it was easy to kind of take advantage of, and that's kind of what you see in this episode, right? Is how easy it is to point the finger at someone and, best case scenario, take everything they have, and worst case scenario, they die for it. And it really was that easy.
Right. So I'm interested also in, was there the story first and then came the research, or just when you was researching and looking at things, that's when the story came? This
was just a story that it's like the chicken and the egg, right? This was a story that has always existed in my heart. So in that sense, I think the story came first and then the research followed, but I've also just always been fascinated with that time period. So I've read enough that research has been part of it as well. But it was this ongoing thing of like idea, research, that research sparks another idea, which sparks another, bit of, well, wait, how would that work kind of research, and so on and so forth.
Now, what I love here is that you're balancing a very contained story, but you're also furthering the story of Ben and Addison and everyone else. So how do you kind of balance the two? Sorry.
No, you're good. That is something that is always something we're looking for in these episodes, is how do you tell a story about someone you've never met and might never see again, 90% of the time on our show, and make that relevant for whatever Ben and Addison are going through emotionally. And so it's a thing that totally informs the themes of the episodes for us. It's something we're constantly thinking about, where, you know, if Ben is helping someone and he cares about that person, what is the resonance with what they're dealing with for Ben, right? What is Ben dealing with as far as giving up on the people he loved because he feels betrayed? You know, that's what our, you know, guest star of the week is dealing with. Where is Ben dealing with that? And how is he going to address that? And how might he, you know, can he help our guest star without, if he doesn't deal with his own issue at the same time? You know, it's an interesting balancing act.
What is really interesting is you kind of gave closure to both Ben, Addison, and even with Magic as well. In terms of, you know, he's dealing with his alcoholism, he's doing the steps and he's in recovery. And you also have this dynamic of, with Ben and Addison saying, I can work with you again. I was hurt. So allowing him to express himself. Can you talk about finding that closure for this episode? You felt that it should be this one. And also moving that story along so that they can get along in the future.
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think, for talking about Magic really quick, that was one of my favorite scenes to write. And it was something we talked about in the room, as far as the closure of Magic's story and Magic dealing with his alcoholism. Obviously, that story is never over. Right. You know, as an alcoholic, that is something that you deal with, you know, for the rest of your life. But what we didn't want to do is have this ongoing story of Magic, you know, taking drinks and sort of not being able to keep his word, and not, we've seen that story on TV before, and it was really important to us that we model the opposite, that we model what a successful recovery looks like, what it looks like for Magic to reach out for support, get it, meet with his sponsor, you know, work his steps, you know, whatever it is that he needs. It was important that we demonstrate that and show that it can be successful and that there can be a happy ending there, and that there often is. And so as much as this episode is about, you know, the fun, you know, of dealing with being in a time where people think all science is witchcraft and all of that, when Magic, you know, talks about you know, the alchemy of transmuting a bad situation into a good one, to me, that was the real magic of the episode. And it's not a coincidence that the title of the episode is A Kind of Magic, and those were the words that come out of Magic's mouth in that scene. So that was a really important scene for us for the show. And for Ben and Addison, they are on a journey that you'll see where it ultimately ends up. But they're on a journey, so that we knew that this was the episode where we had to make certain moves in order for them to get to where we know they're ultimately going to get to. And you will have to stay tuned to find out. Because I certainly wouldn't say that they have found closure necessarily between the two of them in this episode. I would say that they're certainly coming to the table, but that story's not over by any you know, by any stretch.
So then this leads me to my next question. When Addison popped up in Salem, you know, she wasn't supposed to be there, and he looked like he was genuinely startled. Was that out of fear, disgust, a lot of emotions? What was that reaction?
All of the above. I think that this show does a good job of being a metaphor for things, and this is totally a metaphor for you running into your ex at the mall and going, oh, I did not expect to see you there, right? And that, except his, you know, Ben's mall happens to be 1692 Massachusetts, and that's what that is. And so by the time, you know, Addison going into that moment is very nervous to go and deal with her ex, because last they spoke, he made it very clear that he doesn't want to deal with her. But what she doesn't know going into that is, you know, that he's had a journey in this episode. And so when he sees her, it's certainly all of the emotions you described, but he's also had a bit of a journey. And so when the emotion that maybe he doesn't expect to feel in that moment is the relief of seeing this person that, he has an incredible shorthand with, where they start to instantly, they're finishing each other's sentences. And as much as, it's so great to, he loves everybody on the team and he loves working with everyone on the team. Obviously, Addison is this special person in his life. And just because they had, their difficult moments in this season doesn't mean that he doesn't have a certain level of relief when he sees her. So it's a human moment, 100%.
Can you say whether or not he's stronger with her there as opposed to her keeping that distance?
I think 100%, if just for Ben, I think when he's denying any part of himself or closing himself off to something, he suffers in the same way that we all as human beings suffer when we cut off a real part of ourselves. And so him being in denial about a thing, him not willing to face a thing, him not dealing with a thing on our show is always going to lead to some sort of weakness. And he's always stronger when he's open, communicative, receptive, willing to deal with a thing, and always stronger in community and friendship. And that is ultimately the victory of this episode, is community and friendship, right? And you see how community can tear a human being down. And we see that, to this day, unfortunately, but we also see how friendship and community can lift a human being up. And I think for our show, as much as that time period is a sad moment in our history, it was really important to us on this show to have an optimistic moment at the end of this episode, where we were like, hey, you know what? This is how according to us, this is how this history, goes. And that's the joy of writing this show. It's a kind of, coming back all the way to the beginning of this conversation, it's a kind of way of willing something into existence, right? It's a kind of witchcraft in itself. So
kind of speaking a little bit with the witchcraft, I love how you blended in science, the astrology. You had the CPR, for example, that wasn't invented, which kind of made it worse, but good. Can you talk with that kind of the intent of showing, science is basically just things we do not understand, so is magic.
Yeah. 100%. That's 100% it. I think there are things today that we don't understand that I'm sure quantum physics will explain 20 years from now. Things today that people, assume if you see a thing, people might look at it and go, oh, that's crazy. That's not real. That's magic, whatever it is. And, I'm sure we'll have an explanation for it in the future. There were things, 50 years ago that made no sense to us that make total sense now. And, and that's been the case throughout all of history. So as much as it's an opportunity to look at the past and go, haha, look at how far we've come, it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on our own lives and see today, where are we, what are we dismissing that we could be more open to, more receptive to? And that's, maybe there's no such thing as magic at all. Maybe it's all explainable and it's all science, or maybe it's all, maybe it's all a kind of magic anyway. I think it all depends on how you look at it.
Lovely. I loved it. It's the seance. So thank you so much for speaking with me. I love this episode. It was delightful and somewhat closure, happiness.
100%. No, I think what you're saying is 100% correct. I just mean that, it's not like the show ends there.
Right. More story to tell.
Yeah. Totally. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Okay.